Hi, it's David at Art of David Smith. So, I've been asked to show you how to draw a realistic rose, obviously in conjunction with the how to draw a tattoo rose. Following that, somebody asked me if I could explain the best way of doing a realistic rose. So, what I've got here is a oval in the middle. Your best reference is to take photographs or look at photographs of roses on the internet, but at a pinch, this is how I do it. So you've got your oval. What you're looking to do is, obviously the centre of the rose is going to sit somewhere in this top area, something like that. So if we keep that there free for the moment, so just underneath that centre, if we start, just going to simply bring maybe a couple this way, and we start going the other way. At the moment it's not going to mean a lot, but just go with it for the moment. And then as we open up, these get a bit looser, but we're going to keep this central area as like the main body of the rose, and that then is what's going to start opening up. So if we go back to this top one first, so if we then bring this back round on itself, just give it a little bit of thickness for the moment, and you want to keep not a perfect edge, you want a slight kink in it here and there, because it's obviously a realistic flower at the end of the day. If we go now to this top one, we've got the top of the circle, we'll bring this over, and then we're going to tuck that in behind this first one we've popped in. As we get into the centre, again we're just going to kind of start bunching them all up, I suppose is the best way of describing it, because obviously the centre's still quite tight at this point, so everything's coming from that centre, erupting out. So using now our shape, we're going to echo this round and put another one in here. So we've got these two here, these two coming the other way. I'm going to take that up again over the top, tuck it in. Now some of these things I'm teaching you this are very it's worth watching the how to do a tattoo rose, because even though it's a tattoo style, it's very similar in how we construct the rose. So with this one, this petal here, I'm just going to alter the edge a little bit with this scooping round, and again I'm drawing this a lot darker than I would in reality, because I need you to be able to see it on the camera. Now this one here, we're going to, again, we take the flow of this line, the actual path, and then we start altering the edges of the individual petals. So again, I'm going to bring this around. On this one we might have a little bit of extra detail into there. So I've got that one there. Now, as each petal erupts, it's erupting from this central oval. So we're at this point start to pick up more and more of the oval. And here, another one, because as we get to the outside of the flower, these things are opening up more and more. And we pick the oval up again underneath. It's still looking a little bit bizarre at the moment, but we've got to keep building. So back up to this line, what we put in, and what we're constantly doing is tucking in. So we're going to have another one coming from this central area, come round, tucks in underneath the next layer. This next layer we're then going to pull out again. And then that one's going to tuck in underneath this layer. So we've got this constant tucking in underneath the layer previous to it. So again, now as we get further and further out, we need to start bringing larger and larger petals. Now you've still got to keep some of the shape, and you don't want to get carried away too much because you need it to look like a rose and not a large cabbage. So up here, again we'll pull out this one that's really starting to open up now. Tuck that round, comes all the way around, and again tucks behind these central ones. Come a little bit further down, so we're now below the oval, the central oval. So really open these petals out now at the front. And then what we're going to do as well with the older petals, what tends to happen is they start picking up, they're not as smooth, they start picking up certain ridges in them, so we're going to accentuate that as well. Now obviously at this point we still need another petal, so we're tucking it behind this one, coming from here. And as I mentioned right at the very beginning, you're still better, say if you're drawing a cluster of these roses, you don't want them all to look the same, so you would still be better referencing various rose photographs online, and that will give you the differences, what you need if you were doing a whole bunch of roses. And as I say, you don't want them all looking the same. So back to this one, because we've got to obviously tuck this one underneath here as well. Drag this down. As I mentioned, on the edges now we're starting to get some extra details into this, and it'll make a bit more sense when I start to put some shade onto here as well. Be able to draw attention to those elements. So again, we want a nice balanced shape, so we're going to pop an extra petal in there. Over to the other side. So you want the balance, but you don't want it to start look symmetrical, because then that's counter to how a realistic rose would grow anyway. But you want to keep all these small nuances in there. To make it look realistic. So again, we're going to tuck that one behind there. Probably going to need maybe one more into here, something like that. And again, we've opened it right up, maybe even something toward the bottom, and that's tucking right underneath. So what we've got is a very loose design at the moment. Again, a lot darker than I would normally do this, because a lot of these lines we won't be keeping. Now, if we go in with our shading pencil, you're going to need a shader and some sort of blending tool for this. So if necessary, earbuds. This one's been used on a drawing I've just recently done, so that's why it's all caked up in pencils and pastel. But obviously if you've got access to them, blending tools, these are better. So you're going to need those as well. So with this one happens to be a 4B. I've got a 4B and a 6B. What I'm going to do is put in some heavy shade in and around this central oval. Now, similar to how we do features and things like that, you don't want to take the shade right up to the very edge, because light would pick up on this edge even though it's very faint. So it'll just give it a more realistic feel if you don't go all the way in. So again, I'm going to pick out real shaded areas. Blend those out underneath this series of petals around the bottom of the oval. And again, when I start blending these lines out, that's when it will really start to come together. But for the moment, we're just really quickly blasting in these darker areas, start giving some structure to structure to the rose, and we'll take in the light as it's kind of coming down onto the top of the rose. That's how we're going to work it. So again, in these areas, as I've mentioned, we start picking up this slight ribbing as the petals obviously get further and further out and the flower actually gets older. They start becoming quite mottled and even a little bit threadbare as they go past the best. But what that means is there's plenty of detail to draw upon when you're putting those things in. So nice as well too, as a contrast, even when the roses are going over and starting to die, it's still a good study. It's to draw a realistic, a real flower, one in full bloom, against something what's starting to die off, deteriorate. It's a nice contrast. It gives you more of an understanding of the subject as well. So certainly another exercise worth having a go at. So again, into these deeper shaded areas. So these are the real deep areas where the petals are emerging from. So we'll pick out those real deep areas. Just put our shade in quickly for the moment. So hopefully you're all getting to the end of the dreaded lockdown. Now for one, I'll be glad to get back to some normality. It'd be nice to go visit a few restaurants again, take the family out, so looking forward to that. more shade over here, underneath. And take my bit of paper here, so I'm not rubbing it all up at this point. Again, you might be looking at it and thinking, wow, this is really rough, but bear with me. When you start doing the next part, that's when it should all start coming together. And what you're trying not to do is have a lot of these really thick edge lines. That's why under normal circumstances I wouldn't have drawn it this dark, because when you're drawing anything realistic you don't have these real hard edges. You tend to shade off of lines rather than fully draw them in. It's not a tattoo rose after all, which is something you probably do on a more tattooy type style rose. Again, reference the other video. So now with our blending tool, work into this area and soften this whole thing off. So gradually draw the lead around. We're going to have this, obviously this heavy light coming down onto the top, so we're going to accentuate that. So we don't want to go all the way to the edges. You can see now, as we start to use our blending tool, and this is where these things really come into their own, because you can control them very much like a pencil. And as I've mentioned in other videos, they really are as cheap as chips. So really an asset to anybody's art supplies, these things. So what I'll do is, obviously at the end, I'm going to come back into it again with my pencil, just to add in some of the finer detail. So again, from that centre, work your way out, keep your dark areas, and then slowly draw that colour out. Switch out to this one. And then when we get to the oval, as I mentioned about just catching this light on the side of it, you don't want it pure white, so put a bit of shade into there, but you also don't want it dark as the rest, because then that way you give it a real solidness, real 3D feel. Again, I'm going to go back into that area with my pencil just to finish off. Now, as we move to the larger petals, we're going to draw these ribs, these extra details, this ridging, what you get naturally on rose petals on the older ones. You can draw some in from the edges. And the good thing is when you're using the shading tool, if you need a little bit more colour, just go back into one of the heavy leaded areas, pick up some more of the colour and kind of bring it over. So we're smoothing out these dark areas. We don't want them to look too rough. It is a rose after all, it's got a certain smoothness to it, but we also to use that so when we get down to areas like this, again we're keeping this edge, we're going to draw some of this in to show this ridging I've mentioned. I'll put a bit more dark under there as well. So the shader, and we're lifting this petal away from the one underneath it then, so we've got that shade. Again we'll draw some of this lead down and we're going to use that to make the ridging and the detail. Now at this point, obviously if you wanted to add, want to go the whole hog and you wanted some water droplets and things like that, you can start going to that level of detail. But there's enough pictures of water droplets, you don't need me to explain that one to you. But if you add, don't overdo it, 2, maybe 3 water droplets on a rose of this size would be more than sufficient. I've seen pictures where people have really got carried away with them and it spoils the overall effect, so often a case of less is more with this type of thing. So again, onto this one at the top. We're still relatively smooth at this point with the petals. We can imply some of the how it's going to kink in the future, but we don't necessarily want to do the full, right, it's on the edge petals that we've got here. Again, I'm doing this a lot quicker than I normally would, so you please take a bit more time, but what you're starting to see now is how, using this technique, starting with that central oval, that gives you something to work with, and then using this technique gives you quite a believable rose for your drawing. So last couple here now, just the last one. So, as I mentioned, last thing, because we've done a lot of this shading, we've greyed off a lot of this because we've used it to drag out over the petals, so we're just going to go back in and add some of the blackness back in. We'll kind of intimate as well the ridging at that point. Now, you don't want to go all the way around each petal, but you also do need to draw a little bit of attention, put a bit more darkness into certain areas to really carry the full effect, and it'll just sharpen up some of those petals, particularly in the centre. Pull off the overall effect. So it's starting to sharpen up now, some of these. Petals again, and again at this point, if you want to put in a little bit more detail on some of the roses, a bit of damage and things like that, again it'll all add to that overall realism that you're trying to do in this particular picture. Now I could carry on working on this for another little while, but rather than do that on camera, I'll just quickly reiterate what we've done. So we started with an oval, we did our sweeps down, sweeps back across, and then at the top we then started tucking one over the other, making sure they kept tucking in behind, still trying to retain this overall shape of the rose as we worked our way down, but then slowly grew the petals out, opened them up more, and then as we got to the outside we started putting in these extra details of the opening petals and drawing your attention to that. Obviously then we went in with it with the blending tool and the shaded areas to get where we are now. So same with all these things, have a go, practice. If you want to share your results with me, by all means email them through. If you've got any more suggestions for videos you'd maybe like me to cover in the future, please feel free to do so. Any questions, just get in contact. But I think that is very close now to completion, and obviously after this point, if you wanted to put stems on and leaves and things like that, it's just a case of using very similar techniques to build up the rest of your picture. But thank you for watching. Please continue to subscribe, share it amongst your friends, get them to subscribe as well. Makes a big difference. We're now approaching 500 subscribers, so if we could get through the 500 mark, that'd be brilliant. But again, thanks for watching, stay safe and look after yourselves. I'll see you on the next video. All the best, thanks, bye bye.